He was hacked and was ruined until the pizza delivery girl arrived and did what no programmer had. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Imagine, just for a moment, that you're a successful programmer with a booming business. You've spent years building your company, earning respect in the tech world, and now, you're on the verge of taking everything to the next level. But then, disaster strikes. One day, a hacker breaches your system, stealing sensitive data and crashing your servers. It's like a nightmare unfolding right before your eyes. The stress of trying to recover everything you've worked so hard for is overwhelming. Your business is on the edge of ruin. That was exactly the situation Mark Daniels, a software developer and CEO of a small tech startup, found himself in. It wasn't just the loss of the data that was so devastating. It was the feeling of being completely helpless. All those years of hard work, every late night spent coding, every ounce of effort put into growing his company, it was all vanishing, all because of a single security breach. He spent hours, then days, trying to recover what he could. But the hacker had covered their tracks well. Nothing worked. Mark was on the brink of losing everything. As he sat in his small office, staring at a blank screen, he knew that the future he had built was about to come crashing down. He had no one to turn to, no one who could help. That's when the doorbell rang. A simple sound, but it broke the silence in a way that felt almost surreal. He opened the door, expecting to find a typical delivery person, but what he saw caught him off guard. A young woman, dressed in a pizza delivery uniform, stood on his doorstep, holding a large box of pizza. "Hey, you ordered this?" she asked with a smile. Mark blinked, still in a daze from the stress. He'd completely forgotten about the pizza, but as he took the box, something in her demeanor caught his attention. She seemed so normal, so unremarkable. Yet, in that moment, something in her presence felt like a strange comfort. Yeah, I did," Mark muttered, trying to smile. But he was too distracted by everything going wrong in his life. The woman stepped back, as if to leave, but then she hesitated, looking at him more closely. "You look like you're having a rough day," she said, almost too casually. "Is everything okay?" Mark paused. For a moment, he felt like he could spill everything to this stranger. But he didn't. Instead, he just shook his head. "No, I've been hacked. My whole business is falling apart," he admitted. "That sucks," she said simply, before adding, "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around. It's not much, but I can help you with some tech stuff if you want." Mark was stunned. It wasn't some grand gesture, but something in her words resonated with him. "Thanks," he said, not sure how else to respond. She smiled, nodded, and walked away, disappearing into the night. Mark closed the door, staring at the pizza box in his hands. Little did he know, this was the beginning of a change he never saw coming. He would soon learn that this seemingly ordinary pizza delivery girl would do something no programmer, no expert, no one in his life had been able to do. She would help him fix what he had thought was unfixable. Mark Daniels couldn't shake off the feeling that his life was spiraling out of control. Days had passed since that strange encounter with the pizza delivery girl, but he couldn't get her words out of his head. "I can help you with some tech stuff if you want." It sounded so simple, yet the more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he needed someone who wasn't a part of his broken world to help him. The best part? She had offered help without asking for anything in return. That was rare. That night, after tossing and turning, Mark decided to reach out. He needed to do something, anything, to get his business back on track. The hacker had wiped out everything, and he had tried every lead, hired every expert, but nothing worked. So he picked up his phone and sent her a text. "Hey, it's Mark. From the pizza delivery earlier. I think I could use that help you offered." He didn't know what he expected, but he didn't expect the response he got just minutes later. "Sure, I can meet you tomorrow afternoon. I'll bring my laptop. Let's see what we can do." Her casual tone threw him off, but at the same time, it gave him a strange sense of relief. The next day, at exactly 1 p.m., there was a knock on Mark's door. He opened it to find the same girl from the night before standing there, her laptop in hand. "Hey, Mark," she said, flashing a friendly smile. I'm Sarah. Thanks for coming, he replied, stepping aside to let her in. She immediately set up her laptop at his cluttered desk. Let's see what we're working with, she said, cracking her knuckles. Mark watched in awe as Sarah plugged in her device and began to type furiously. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, solitary effort he had been doing alone for days. Her fingers moved with purpose, a rhythm Mark had never seen before. So what happened? She asked as she worked, never looking up. Some hacker got into my systems, wiped everything out, and I've been trying to recover it all, but it's like it never existed. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, pausing only to take a sip of coffee. Got it. You know, you've probably got more backups than you realize. Most people don't realize how much data is still recoverable until it's too late. Mark blinked. Backups, he repeated, unsure of what she meant. Yeah, most companies automatically back up files, even when they don't know it. Let me see if I can track down what's still intact, Sarah explained. She began typing again, her eyes scanning the screen, focused. Mark felt a wave of hope, something he hadn't felt in days. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah sat back in her chair, looking satisfied. Well, there's still something here. A few traces of your old files. It's not much, but it's a start. Mark couldn't believe it. Are you saying you can fix this? Sarah grinned. I think I can, but I'll need a bit more time. Mark felt a rush of emotions. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. This pizza delivery girl, this stranger, was doing something no programmer or expert had been able to do. She was saving him. And he realized this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about the unexpected connections that could change everything. Mark sat in his chair, staring at Sarah's laptop screen. He couldn't believe his eyes. The data, the files, the information he had spent days trying to recover. Sarah had found it. It wasn't much, but it was enough to feel like the weight of the world was slowly being lifted off his shoulders. She glanced over at him, a quiet smile on her face. It's not perfect, but we can work with this, she said. Mark nodded, still in disbelief. You've done what no one else could. I don't even know how to thank you. Sarah shrugged, her fingers still typing. You don't have to. I'm just doing what I do best. Mark watched her, feeling a sense of gratitude he hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just a pizza delivery girl. She was something far more. As she continued to work, Mark found himself reflecting on how unlikely this situation was. A few days ago, he was a successful businessman, sitting at the top of his game, and now, here he was, relying on someone who had no connection to his world. Sarah wasn't just helping him with data recovery. She was changing the way he looked at life. He had always been focused on numbers, on the tech world, on the bottom line. But now, as he watched her work with a quiet determination, he saw something else. There was kindness in her. A genuine desire to help without expecting anything in return. He realized how much he had been missing in his own life. His success had come at the cost of meaningful relationships. He had focused so much on his business that he had neglected the things that truly mattered. And now, here she was, showing him a side of life he had forgotten. Sarah paused for a moment, glancing up at him. So what's the next step? Mark blinked, pulled out of his thoughts. The next step, he repeated. She nodded, her expression focused but gentle. Yeah, now that we've got some of the data back, we can start rebuilding. But there's one thing I want to ask you. Are you going to let this setback define you? Or are you going to use it as a lesson to grow? Her words hit him harder than he expected. Mark leaned back in his chair, the weight of her questions sinking in. He had been so consumed by his failure, so caught up in the idea that he had lost everything, that he hadn't even considered the possibility of growth. But Sarah was right. This setback didn't have to define him. It could be the beginning of something new. Mark realized he needed to shift his focus, not just on recovering his business, but on recovering himself. I think I'm ready to grow, he said quietly. Sarah gave him a soft smile. Good. Because you've got more to offer than just tech skills. This is a chance to start over, to build something even better than before. As the day went on, they worked side by side, Sarah guiding him through the steps of rebuilding what had been lost. It wasn't just the data she was helping him restore, it was his confidence, his drive, and his connection to the world around him. For the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he was on the right path again. But as the hours passed and Sarah packed up her laptop to leave, Mark knew something had changed. He wasn't just grateful for her help with his business. He was grateful for how she had reminded him of the importance of kindness, of human connection. Hey, Sarah, Mark called out as she reached the door. She turned, a curious look on her face. Thanks for everything, he said, his voice sincere. I don't think I could have done it without you. Sarah smiled. That's what I'm here for. As she left, Mark felt a new sense of hope, something he hadn't felt in ages. Sarah had come into his life when he least expected it, and in a way, she had saved him, not just from the mess of a hacked system, but from his own isolation. And that, he realized, was the real breakthrough. The following week, Mark found himself sitting in his office, staring at his computer screen, which no longer felt like an enemy. Thanks to Sarah's help, he had not only restored his data, but his confidence had returned as well. The business was still fragile, but there was a renewed sense of hope. Sarah had become more than just a savior. She was a collaborator now, and Mark couldn't deny that he was starting to look at her differently. The way she carried herself, the quiet confidence she exuded, was unlike anything he had seen in the tech world. She was intelligent, driven, and completely at ease in her own skin. Mark admired her for it, but there was also something about her that made him feel both humbled and inspired. The two of them had been meeting more frequently, not just to work on his company, but to brainstorm ideas, share thoughts on the future of tech, and, more often than not, just talk about life. She had this unique ability to make him feel like he wasn't alone, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't defined by his business alone. One afternoon, as they were working on a new project together, Sarah paused, looking at him with an expression that was both serious and curious. Mark, you've come a long way in such a short time. I can see you're changing, but I want to ask you something, she said, her voice softer than usual. Mark looked up from his laptop, intrigued. What's that? Why are you still pushing yourself so hard? She asked, not unkindly. I get the business side of it, but what's driving you now? Is it just to prove yourself, or is there something more to it? Her question hit him harder than he expected. He had never really stopped to think about it. All these years, he had been focused on climbing the corporate ladder, on earning respect, on building something that mattered. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the bigger picture. It wasn't just about the tech, or the company, or the money. It was about connection. I don't know, Mark admitted after a long pause. I think I've been running from something. Maybe from myself. From the fact that I've always felt like I wasn't enough unless I was working, unless I was achieving something. Sarah nodded, as if she understood. And now? She asked gently. I'm not sure, Mark replied, his voice quiet. But I think I'm ready to find out. Maybe it's time to focus on what really matters. Not just the company, but my life, my relationships. Maybe that's what's been missing all along. Sarah smiled softly, giving him a reassuring look. That's a good start, she said. Mark felt a weight lifting from his chest. It wasn't a magic fix, but the realization was freeing. He didn't have to keep running on empty, constantly proving himself. He could build something meaningful, yes, but he could also take a step back and live in the moment. As the days passed, Mark and Sarah continued to work together, but now, their partnership had shifted. It wasn't just about recovering data or fixing systems. It was about growing together, learning from each other, and building something sustainable. Mark began to see the world in a new light. He wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, he had found something far more valuable than success. It wasn't the code, the numbers, or the endless meetings. It was the people who made the journey worthwhile. And Sarah, the pizza delivery girl who turned his life around, had become the person who showed him the way. Mark sat at his desk, looking at the progress he and Sarah had made over the past few weeks. His company was no longer teetering on the edge of collapse. In fact, with Sarah's help, things were turning around faster than he had ever expected. But it wasn't just the business that had improved. He had begun to change as well. The relentless pressure he had put on himself for years had been replaced with a sense of calm. He no longer felt like he was constantly running in a race that had no finish line. There was a new purpose to his work, one that included both success and balance. It was a strange feeling, but it was a good one. Sarah had made a bigger impact on him than just solving his data recovery issues. She had taught him that there was more to life than the numbers. She had reminded him of the importance of taking a step back, connecting with others, and not letting work consume everything. She had opened his eyes to the idea that you could build something meaningful without sacrificing your happiness or well-being. As they sat together in the office, Sarah looked over at him, a curious expression on her face. You've really changed, you know that? She said, her voice soft but genuine. Mark chuckled, not sure if he should take that as a compliment or a challenge. I hope it's a good change, he replied, smiling. Sarah grinned. It is. You seem lighter, happier even. Mark paused for a moment, thinking about how he had felt in the past, weighed down by endless deadlines and expectations. Yeah, I guess I do, he said, his tone thoughtful. I didn't realize how much I was carrying until I started putting some of it down. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving his. It's good to see you like this. I've never seen you this free. Mark looked at her, a sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. I owe a lot of that to you, Sarah. You've changed my life in ways I never expected. I mean, I'm not just talking about the business. You've shown me what really matters. Sarah smiled, the warmth in her eyes unmistakable. I didn't do that much, she said, brushing off the compliment. You were always capable of this. You just needed a little push. Mark shook his head. No, it was more than that. You made me realize that I had been focusing on the wrong things for too long. He paused, his gaze softening. I didn't even know how much I needed to hear that until you said it. There was a brief silence between them, one that felt comfortable, natural. Then Sarah broke it, her voice light. Well, I'm glad I could help. But I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. We've still got work to do, right? Mark smiled, his eyes lighting up. Right. And this time, we're doing it together. As the days went on, their partnership grew even stronger. Sarah wasn't just an employee or a business partner anymore. She had become a trusted friend, someone Mark knew he could rely on not just in business, but in life. The bond they had formed was built on mutual respect and shared goals, and it felt different than anything he had ever experienced before. Mark had learned a lot over the past few weeks, not just about business, but about life. He had learned the importance of slowing down, of letting go of the need to always be in control, and of embracing the unexpected. Most importantly, he had learned that sometimes the people you least expect can make the biggest impact on your life. As Mark sat at his desk, Sarah working beside him, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. He wasn't just rebuilding his business, he was rebuilding his life. And with Sarah by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. Weeks passed, and Mark's business was steadily recovering. Thanks to Sarah's insights and their hard work together, the systems were stronger than ever. The company's foundation was solid, and Mark had a renewed sense of direction. But more than that, his outlook on life had shifted. No longer was he driven by the chase for success at any cost. Now, he valued balance, connection, and personal growth. He had learned to look beyond just the numbers. But even as he embraced this new mindset, there was still one question lingering in his mind. What was next for him and Sarah? Their collaboration had grown into something special, and while Mark had always been driven by his career, he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward her. She had become more than just a colleague. She was a trusted confidant, someone he admired not just for her skills, but for her integrity and kindness. It wasn't just about business anymore. They had built a partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared goals, and he couldn't help but wonder if it could be something more. One evening, as they worked late at the office, Mark couldn't hold back any longer. Sarah was sitting across from him, her eyes glued to her laptop screen as she typed away. He had been watching her for a while, unsure of how to begin the conversation. Finally, he took a deep breath and set his laptop aside. Sarah, he said, his voice hesitant. She looked up, raising an eyebrow. What's up? Mark's heart was racing, but he pushed forward. I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything. About the company, about us. Sarah's expression softened, and she leaned back in her chair, waiting for him to continue. You've helped me in ways I can't even begin to explain. You've not only saved my business, but you've changed the way I look at life. I've learned so much from you. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't want this to be just a business partnership. I don't want to lose what we have. He paused, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I want to build something more with you. There was silence for a moment. Mark could feel his heart pounding in his chest, waiting for her response. Sarah looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. Mark, she began, her voice steady but soft. I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I feel the same way. Mark's breath caught in his throat. You do? She nodded, smiling. I've been thinking about this for a while now. We've been through so much together. This business, the personal growth, the late nights. and I realized that I don't want to just work with you. I want to be there for you in all aspects of your life. Mark felt a weight lift off his shoulders as Sarah's words sank in. For so long, he had been focused on his work, but now, with Sarah by his side, he realized that there was so much more to life than just success. It was about the connections you made along the way, the people you cared for, and the moments you shared. I think we're ready for the next step, he said, his voice filled with conviction. Together, we can do anything. Sarah's smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, Mark felt at peace. It wasn't just the success of the business that mattered. It was the bond they had built. As they sat there, surrounded by the success they had created together, Mark realized that this partnership was only the beginning of something much bigger. The journey ahead was filled with endless possibilities, and with Sarah by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Mark's life had started to feel like a whirlwind, with everything moving so fast: his business, his relationship with Sarah, and his own personal growth. It was exhilarating, but at times, it also felt overwhelming. After their late-night conversation, things between him and Sarah had shifted. They weren't just business partners anymore. They had opened up to each other in a way that felt so right. But despite the clarity he had found in his work and his emotions, something was lingering in the back of his mind. His past, the things he had buried deep inside. Mark had always been the kind of person who kept his feelings hidden, whether it was his struggles with self-worth or the burdens of his past relationships. As he looked at Sarah, he realized there was a side of himself he hadn't yet shared with her, and that scared him. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. He did, more than anyone. But there was a vulnerability he had avoided for so long, and now it was catching up with him. One evening, as they were having dinner in the office, Sarah noticed that something seemed off. Mark had been quiet for most of the meal, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Hey," she said gently, setting down her fork. "What's going on? You've been quiet all night." Mark looked up at her, caught off guard by the question. He had thought he could push through it, that he could just focus on the future and ignore the past. But now, with Sarah looking at him with such concern, he knew he couldn't keep this inside anymore. "It's just, there's something I haven't told you," he said, his voice hesitant. Sarah's expression softened. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words he was about to say. "Before I started this company, I was lost," he began. "I had a bad breakup. I thought I could move on from it, but I didn't. It hit me harder than I realized, and I buried it deep down. I focused on work, thinking that would fix everything. But it didn't." Sarah sat quietly, listening intently. Mark continued, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I thought I could be the guy who had everything together, you know? The successful entrepreneur, the guy who always had a plan. But deep down, I was just scared. Scared that I wasn't good enough. Scared of being vulnerable again." He paused, the weight of his words sinking in. "I thought if I could just get the business right, everything else would fall into place. But I was wrong." Sarah reached across the table, gently taking his hand in hers. "Mark, you don't have to carry this alone. You don't have to be perfect. No one is." Mark looked at her, the depth of her understanding making his heart swell. "But I want to be someone I can be proud of," he said quietly. "I want to be more than just a business owner. I want to be the person who's real, who isn't afraid to be himself." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You are more than enough, Mark. You're already someone I admire. You're strong, not because you never fail, but because you keep going, no matter what." Mark felt a weight lift off his shoulders, as if the years of bottled-up emotions were finally being released. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the path to healing, not just as a businessman, but as a person. He realized that Sarah wasn't just helping him with the business. She was helping him become the man he had always wanted to be. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, even when I couldn't see it myself." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "I'm not going anywhere, Mark. We're in this together, all the way." As they sat there, hand in hand, Mark felt something shift inside him. The fear that had once held him back was no longer in control. With Sarah by his side, he knew that no matter what challenges came next, they could face them together. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly free. The next few weeks felt like a blur for Mark. He had never been so focused, not just on his business, but on the future he was building alongside Sarah. Together, They had managed to transform the company into something stronger than it had ever been. But more importantly, they were growing together, learning from each other, and becoming a team in every sense of the word. Mark had made peace with his past, and with Sarah's help, he was more confident in his ability to move forward, not just as a businessman, but as someone who valued human connection and trust. As they sat together in the office one evening, the hum of the computers the only sound, Mark realized how far they had come. Sarah was reviewing some data on her laptop, her focus intense. He watched her for a moment, a smile tugging at his lips. She had become more than just a colleague to him. She was his partner, his confidant, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he could truly be himself without fear. "Sarah," Mark said, breaking the silence. She looked up, eyebrows raised. "You're quiet tonight. What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the future. Ours, I mean." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes locking with his. "That sounds serious," she teased, though there was a warmth in her voice. Mark chuckled, but the seriousness of his thoughts remained. "It is. I've spent so much time thinking about my career and business, but now I want to think about something bigger. Something that's just about us. I want to keep building this company, but I also want to build a future with you." Sarah's expression softened, and for a moment, Mark felt a nervous knot in his stomach. "I've been thinking about the same thing," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't want to rush into anything, but I feel like we've been on the same path for a while now. It's not just about the business anymore. It's about us and the life we want to create together." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He had been afraid to take that step, to open up about his feelings in such a way, but now, hearing Sarah say the words he had been too hesitant to speak, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He realized that, with her by his side, anything was possible. "So what do we do next?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. Sarah grinned, standing up from her desk. "Next, we take the next step, Mark. Together. Whatever it looks like." Mark stood as well, walking over to her. For a long moment, they simply stood there, their hands brushing lightly, the quiet hum of the office around them. He realized that this was what he had been missing all along, a sense of purpose, not just in his work, but in his life. And now, with Sarah, he had both. They had faced so many challenges, both in the business and personally, but they had come out stronger, more connected, and more sure of themselves than ever before. Mark knew there would be more obstacles ahead. There always were. But with Sarah by his side, he was ready to face them all. "I'm ready," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "Let's do this. Together." Sarah's smile mirrored his, her eyes shining with the same determination. "Together," she agreed. As they stood there, hand in hand, Mark knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as a team. No more running from the past. No more fear. Just the two of them, building something real, something lasting, and most importantly, something they could be proud of. And for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the months passed, Mark and Sarah's partnership only grew stronger. What had started as a professional collaboration had blossomed into a deep, meaningful relationship. They had learned to navigate the complexities of both their personal and professional lives, finding harmony between the two. Mark's business was thriving, not just because of the innovative ideas he and Sarah had developed together, but because they had built it on trust, collaboration, and shared vision. It wasn't just about the profits anymore. It was about building something sustainable, something that had a lasting impact. The company's success had become secondary to the joy and fulfillment they found in each other. Mark had learned that true success wasn't about the numbers or titles. It was about creating something that truly mattered. Sarah had taught him that. And in turn, Mark had reminded Sarah that success could still be personal, not just professional. He had shown her that it was possible to build a future, not just with business strategies, but with genuine human connection. They spent more time together outside the office now, enjoying simple moments like weekend hikes, lazy afternoons at local coffee shops, and spontaneous road trips. It wasn't always about making big decisions or working late into the night. Sometimes, the best moments were the quiet ones, when they simply enjoyed each other's company. One evening, after a particularly busy week, Sarah and Mark sat together on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Mark leaned back in his chair, looking over at Sarah. "You know," he said softly, I never thought I'd be here, doing this. I never thought I'd find someone who would make me feel like everything I've worked for was worth it. Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. I never thought I'd find someone who would see me for more than just my skills. You've changed my life, Mark. Mark reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. We've changed each other's lives, he said. They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment sink in. Mark had never felt more content. He had built something meaningful, not just in business, but in life. And he knew that it wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but with Sarah by his side, he felt ready for anything. She had become more than just his partner in business. She was his partner in life. Together, they had built something solid, something that went beyond just profits and achievements. It was a foundation rooted in trust, love, and mutual respect. And that, Mark realized, was the most important thing of all. Looking at Sarah, he knew that no matter what happened in the future, they would always face it together. The future wasn't uncertain anymore. It was filled with possibilities, and they were ready to embrace them, side by side.